Hello, my name is Jared, and I am a medical student working with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery to bring you Saturday Night Chat. Saturday Night Chat is a monthly chat that creates a space for people to share their recovery journey and to show people in and seeking recovery that they are not alone and that recovery is possible. Today, we'll be hearing from Phil S. Phil, thank you for being with us today. Really appreciate it, taking your time to share your story.
Well, I'm very grateful to be here. I appreciate your inviting me. And one of our tenants is carrying the message, which I am doing, however, obliquely.
Excellent. Well, thank you. To get started, please tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm 76 years old. I'll be 77 pretty soon. Because I have a math background, I've done the arithmetic and I've been sober 62% of my life. OMG. Um, I've known people who came in when they were 16. I've known people who came in when they were 80. I grew up to pretty much untoppable privilege. My parents were well educated, upwardly mobile, white, Depression era, World War II era, um, achievers of the 50s, if you will. And I was tall and white and had access to pretty much anything that people want in this life. My father was bipolar in the era before lithium. And so, as a doctor, learned how to self medicate, a skill which he passed along to me.
Mhm.
Um, I had terrible asthma as a little child. And because my parents were progressive, at least what could be considered progressive in the 50s, taught me to give myself injections of adrenaline. So I was actually trained by medical professionals to give myself needles when I was in grade school. I was primed for the 60s. My father died when I was 11. I went from the prestige and income of a doctor's son to the prestige and income of a nurse's son, which, trust me, in that era was a precipitous drop. I had been a problem student because I was precocious and because, as I once said to a teacher, if you're not going to entertain me, I'll do it myself. This did not bode well for the public school system in the 50s. I was enabled through high school. I ended up in reform school. I was used, used shamelessly, I tell you, to integrate the Maryland penal system in the mid 60s. They said, we need some big white boys. And I said, I'm not a big white boy. I'm tall when I stand up, that's all. But they didn't believe me. So this was my first experience with being punched out in my sleep. Not fun. I got out of reform school much the way I got out of everything throughout my life because I'm tall and white and erudite. And again, just totally unfair privilege. People are always talking about what is fair. And I like to tell them that fair is where you take a pig to win a prize. Normal is a town in Illinois. Other than that, the two words are pretty much meaningless. So I bounced around. I graduated from high school. Again, I was enabled because they wanted to get rid of me. I attended college. Actually, I enrolled. Uh, One of the funny things in wedding announcements in Madison, Wisconsin, is that you always see so and so, quote, attended the University of Wisconsin, end quote. And you don't need to be much older than 6 or 7 to realize means didn't graduate. Well, if you've lived in Wisconsin longer than 10 years, you've attended the University of Wisconsin in some way or another, whether it's an outreach program or a special studies or whatever. So I enrolled, but I had spent a lot of time taking drugs of one sort or another, mainlining. I was initially a speed freak, methadone, and I decided that was a little too wear and tear, so I became a junkie. And that's a step up in your life, something's not really going right. And then I decided I was getting old and had to go back to school. So I came to Madison, Wisconsin, the Berkeley of the Midwest, as it was advertised back in the early 70s. And I decided that because I was going to try to go to school and make something of myself, I was going to quit shooting dope and drink because, and here I quote directly from that era, all right, it's a manufactured product, and so I'll be able to control the dosage. Famous last words.
Mm.
The glory of my drinking was everybody was drunk in Madison in the 70s. It was accepted, it was expected. The cops would tell you you were too drunk to drive and follow you home, or just make you park your car and take a cab. People didn't even get tickets. And because I was a resourceful person, I got a job as a bartender because if you're going to drink, why not get a job as a bartender where you get paid to drink, which I did. And the great gift there was that it allowed me to run my life into the toilet in a very short period of time. I got to Madison in the summer of 72. In March of 76, I literally died in the ice storm. Huge historic event in Madison. It took out the power for the city for about 5 days. I had gone to see my girlfriend, and she said, I won't see you because you've been drinking. And I said, no, I haven't. She said, yes, you have. And that went back and forth for 5 minutes. And I finally said, well, it's only beer. You can't get drunk on beer. And she threw me out. So I went and drank at her, which is something that alcoholics do. And was walking home from the bar. And whether I tripped or just passed out, I don't know. But I fell asleep in somebody's front yard and got covered with ice and became a little sculpture. And fortunately, a passing patrol car saw me and hauled me off to the old University Avenue hospitals, which are right across from Randall. Um, we had a fellow sufferer, Terry McGovern, who was the daughter of George McGovern, the presidential candidate, who died exactly the same way, except this was 20 years later, of course. But she went out in the backyard and fell down in the cold. And fortunately, I was in the front yard. So there's a very powerful, for me, there, but for fortune. I got out of the hospital finally. I signed out against medical advice and went to the Washington Hotel, which used to be at the corner of West Wash and I guess that'd be Bedford, and got myself something to drink because I felt terrible. My girlfriend, who had driven me to these acts in the first place, eventually dragged me down to 511 North Carroll Street, the Alano Society, the Alano Club, to an AA meeting. Typically, the leader of the meeting, in this case, a speaker meeting, will start out by beginning the 5th chapter of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is traditional to be read at every meeting. And this guy was like a tent revival preacher. So he banged his fist on the podium. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And I turned to my girlfriend and said, honey, I'm not that crazy, okay? So my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was in great protest. It was controlled by a woman. And dare I say, woman, she was probably 22 at the time, and incredibly courageous to have done all of this. I did not want to be there. I thought as many desperate situations as I'd been in as a result of my drug use and my drinking, I could not have sunk lower than to have ended up at Alcoholics Anonymous. How 𝗍𝗵𝘂𝗧𝘂𝗧. I mentioned my parents were well-educated professional people with a great sense of snobbery. They were not Episcopalian, but could have been. As a dear friend of mine says, the only true sin in the Episcopal Church is poor taste. So there was that whole thing. I remember a great lesson from my sponsor. Early on, I was whining about the fact that people were reading, again, the How It Works from the 5th chapter that the man read like a tent revival meeting, and saying, these people have read this thing 100 times and they still can't read it very well. And he said, well, not everyone is as glib as you, but these people know how to stay sober a day at a time, and you don't. So why don't you shut up and listen? And this is what we call tough love. There was a lot of tough love when I came in, and I wasn't even vaguely in the mood for it. It really was a lot of World War II veterans who would sneer at you and say, I spilled more than you ever drank. Or, you got 2 ears and you got 1 mouth. Try and figure out what that means. And other grizzled homilies. But the reality was these people did know how to stay sober. And there is a step called the second step, which says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And many of us break that down. So I came to meetings. And after coming to meetings for a period of time, I came to, as in achieved, possibly for the first time, some sense of awareness. And then I came to believe. Certainly not in a monotheistic deity, but that I could get better by showing up at these meetings. One of the interpretations of God that people use, which is my particular favorite, is group of drunks. So the power greater than myself is the group, and the group which exists anywhere. We are the fast food of mental health. You can go to a meeting pretty much anywhere in the world, and it's only $1. And if you don't have $1, nobody cares. In fact, we make great pains to announce, if you don't have money, your presence is more important than your cash. So kind of far out. Got sober, stayed sober, stayed with that young woman who had dragged me down there kicking and screaming. She was healthy enough and perceptive enough to realize she wasn't going to let me drown, but now that she'd got me successfully on the beach, she was out of there. And so she was. And I remember complaining bitterly to my sponsor, how could she possibly reject me? So I had quit drinking for her. And he said, no, you quit drinking for you. And if you want to use the outrageous anger that you have for this woman, use it to not drink. I will not let her make me drink. I will not let my anger toward her make me drink. So this is one of the profound things that we get out of this whole shebang is you got to spin it. Let's figure out the positive side to these things. Cat Stevens, whom no one has heard of in the modern era, but who was once incredibly popular, then incredibly reviled,
I think
has
he
a
goes by
song in which
Yusuf
he
now.
says, Yusuf indeed. But he says, and if I ever lose my eyes and all my colors all run dry, yes, if I ever lose my eyes, I won't have to cry no more. So, that's taking it to a bit of an extreme, but we do that too. Um, I never achieved any professional notoriety. I never got a degree. I never even got any computer credentials, even though I worked in the field for 30 years. Um, in the world of what my background was, I never amounted to anything. And I share a wonderful story with people, which, is a violation of all that is holy. But we had a fellow sufferer, which is one of the ways we describe each other, who was a dentist. And he got sober for a couple of years and realized he hated being a dentist. And he was distraught. He thought, oh my God, how much money did I spend to become a dentist? Oh my God, how much money do I make being a dentist? And finally, if I'm not a dentist, who in the hell am I? And then he said, and I quote directly here again in violation of all that is holy. But then I thought about old Phil over there, and he never seems to know what he's going to do for a living, and he certainly has a good time. So I exist in the zeitgeist to show people that you can never amount to anything and yet have a wonderful life.
Well, thank you for giving me that great background. And I totally agree with a lot of the points that you're making about, you know, it's hard to say, what a person has accomplished and separate that from what their professional or what their degree is, things like that. You strike me as a very successful person who has made really a great life. And whether you have the degree of to show for the professional career doesn't necessarily matter. I appreciate that. I appreciate the background that you've given about sort of what led up to and sort of precipitated the start of stopping using alcohol. Um, what sort of things were difficult for you in those early days of sobriety, and what sort of things became easier for you at that time?
Quite literally, it was pretty much impossible for me to not drink. I went to AA meetings and did drink for a year and a half. Um, I literally asked people at 511 and at other meetings, I know you're supposed to not drink, but how do you do that? As if that were actually a rational question. How do you not drink? What the hell does that even mean? But it was very real for me at the time. And I don't know how I finally got to the point where I decided to not drink for real as opposed to pretending to not drink. Part of it was showing up. We have an old expression, meeting makers make it. And I think by being in those rooms, there is an osmosis that permeates your being over a period of time. I have sat in the very clubhouse, which I now revere and credit for literally giving me not only my life, but my quality of life. I have sat in that building with a bottle of Fresca with about a third full of rum at speaker meetings. Um, what kind of gross hypocrisy and disrespect is that? But that's who we are when we're using. There's a wonderful story. Uh, what is the difference between an alcoholic and a junkie? Well, both of them will steal your wallet, but a junkie will help you look for it.
I like it. How? often were you attending meetings in those early, did you say a year and a half before
Probably
you
2, 3 times a week. I was also going to outpatient counseling,
okay.
uh, which, well, it was all about putting one over on my girlfriend and pretending to her that I cared. I did care, but what I cared about was drinking. Um, I finally had a meltdown of sorts at a concert at the Coliseum. We were in the cheap seats or the Bob Uecker seats, if you remember the old Miller Lite commercials. And I had to go to the bathroom, and I couldn't get back from the bathroom back to my seat with my girlfriend because it was too scary. I was too messed up. I couldn't go down those vertical concrete steps in the Coliseum. And that's when I applied for and was able to get into inpatient treatment, which back in those days was considered something of a watershed achievement. In the modern era, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And after many, many years of studying the disease as closely as it's possible to study, um, I have the profound insight that when you're ready, you're ready. And when you're not, you're not. So, that and $5 will get you a latte.
Was the inpatient effective for you or not so much?
Very much, very much. But again, I was ready. And I had been told that I needed inpatient the entire time I was in outpatient. And the first day I got to inpatient, which by the way was after a fairly brutal several days at detox, um, I'm walking down the hallway like cock of the walk as if, hey, look at me, which is what I did, let's face it. And a counselor looks at me and she said, well, your problem is apparent. I said, you're goddamn right, both of them. I saw someone else who said, how are you feeling about being here? I said, well, I'm pretty proud of myself. And she said, well, maybe you could try being grateful. That's possibly more useful. And I really recall feeling so bitch slapped by that. What an offense. And a lot of the best advice that I've gotten seemed offensive when I first heard it. And that's part of our posture. The basic premise is we are egomaniacs with inferiority complexes.
So that advice that was given to you about being more grateful in the moment, it would hurt and it was offensive, but looking back, you realize that it wasn't quite so offensive. Is that what you're saying?
Well, not only that, but it's the cornerstone of who I am today.
Mm.
I mean, I survived my youth. A lot of people went down with far less bad behavior than mine. And we have a friend who I see every week who says, gratitude is both the fuel and the lubricant of my recovery.
Throughout your time in healthcare, can you think of any instances that really stood out to you where a healthcare professional really went out of their way to be there for you, to help you, to get you what you needed? Or perhaps if the opposite is true, if you feel like a healthcare professional did damage, insulted you, harmed your recovery in any way, and kind of what happened there.
Well, let me preface that by saying I'm possibly the worst person to ask about their relationship with the healthcare industry, given that my father was a doctor. My mother was his office nurse. After he died, she went on to teach nursing and was one of the first RNMSs ever, long before that was fashionable. And I, in fact, helped her get her master's by doing the math part, or shall we say, greatly assisting. But, I grew up in a medical environment. I was used to talking with medical professionals at dinner. Um, I would hear them talk about things like intracardial catheterization and um, so forth when other kids were learning about, Dick and Jane and See Spot Run and that kind of thing. So, also coming out of my father's death, I suddenly had to talk to doctors who were not my father and have never had the discomfort or demurring to medical authority that so many people have. I don't know so much of my generation, but certainly of my parents' generation. It has been advocated since certainly the 20th century that older people always need an advocate to go with them to talk to the doctor and not let them uh, tell you what to do and not tell you why, tell you to take something and not tell you why, not talk about interactions and contraindications. Um, I suddenly remembered a story. I had a vasovagal reaction in fourth grade, which was who knows why. No one's ever figured out why. But I was sent to see a third party, if you will, physician because of it. And the nurse gave me the little jar and she said, "Can you tinkle in the jar?" And I said, "I doubt it, but I'll be able to urinate, I imagine." Which you don't expect from, a 9-year-old kid in 1958. But, you know, again, my relationship has always been, okay, justify yourself, buddy.
Okay. A little bit of a different approach than a lot of people probably see healthcare.
Well, again, there's not the ivory tower. I also was witness to my father and his friends' parties and poker games and whatnot, wherein not only one doctor, but half a dozen doctors were discussing current events and student nurses and the like.
Sure. Can you talk about the differences in navigating the healthcare system as a person handling active addiction compared to in the years afterwards, all the way to now?
Well, you can look directly at them and say, no, I can't take that,
Mm.
especially with pain medications. Now, I have taken pain medications for uh, two knee and one hip surgery and tooth replacements. And I've been very comfortable with that for the very simple reason that I was a junkie. I know exactly what it's all about. And I know when it is indicated and when it is contraindicated. And believe me, um, for a recovering person, if ever a term contraindicated really made sense, it's with us and addictive medicines. I was in the hospital, I'm going to say 5 years ago, with a crushing chest pain. We had no idea why, and we ran all the tests and blah, blah, and whatnot. And they were giving me morphine for my crushing chest pain, and it was relieving the crushing chest pain. So it was okay. And I was scheduled for another injection at about 2 in the morning. And they said, "Are you ready for your injection?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I think the time where I need it has passed. I want it,
Mm.
but I know that that is contraindicated." So I even have some proof of the pudding some 40 years into recovery that when I have the opportunity for a free high, if you will, I'm going to pass it up because I understand who I am and what I do not need to do.
Absolutely. And I imagine that's something that's not always the easiest thing to do in a situation like that.
It was so overwhelmingly gratifying
Mm,
that I was able to put my money where my mouth was, that, that was probably a better high than the morphine would have been. I think that's one of
absolutely.
the other things people don't realize about recovering from addiction of any flavor, is that you get your full range of emotions, and that includes the bad as well as the good. Not that there are bad emotions, but painful. So,
When you think about meeting a medical professional for the first time, are you open about your history immediately? And do you feel like it ever changes the healthcare you receive?
yes and no.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. It would be very concerning if you would have answered yes.
Well, let me simply say that, being the Madisonian and prejudiced Madisonian that I am, I believe that if I went to a healthcare professional in Lubbock, Texas, they might tell me that I'm not really an addict. I just need to follow their religion, but not around here.
Being in Madison, you think has been ideal for not having those kind of encounters.
Well, it's ideal for not having a lot of kinds of encounters, but everybody knows it's a great party town, but it's also a great recovery town.
Absolutely. While we're still on the topic of medicine and healthcare, I'd like to know if you had any experiences with medications that help with sobriety, and if you've used any of those, or if you know individuals who have had success with them.
Yes, I've had quite a bit of experience, and no, I don't think any of them are worth a damn. Uh,
Okay.
we're addicts, and again, I use the term interchangeably. I mean, alcohol is a drug. There is one drug that can kill you in withdrawal. That one's alcohol. So when you talk about hard drugs, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Um, but the other is that I have tried antabuse, and I drank while I was taking antabuse, and I turned bright red and was very uncomfortable. But that didn't mean I didn't drink. Again, I wandered around the clubhouse bracing people. How do you not drink? Again,
Mm.
as if it meant something. Um, and I will reiterate, when you're ready, you're ready. And when you're not, you're not. And we talk a great deal about rigorous honesty. And rigorous honesty involves with yourself primarily. I am who I am. And, I'm not Bruce Springsteen, whom I might have chosen to be. But again, I'm not Charles Manson, who I was more headed toward being. So,
Absolutely. I'd like to hear a little bit more about sort of the place that AA has in your life, because you just mentioned that a medication that is designed to help people stop drinking was something that was not strong enough, and you were able to drink through that, through the medication that made you feel horrible. But AA was the thing that really sealed the deal. Can you talk a bit more about why you
absolutely.
think that is?
There are any number of reasons. I think primarily it was the most accessible at the time that I got sober, which was 1978 is my anniversary date. Um, there was some NA around. Right now, there's something like 25 or 26 12-step programs, I mean, they have online gaming anonymous, for God's sake. There's a lot of things out there. And I don't mean to minimize or ridicule them. I'm sure that it can be an addiction. One of the great, great, great gifts of my recovery is that when I came in, and I observed something which I, well, felt condescending about, I'd say, well, that's bullshit. And now that I've been around, been sober for a little while, I say, I really don't understand that because I don't. And I am not in a position to speak with authority on anything but me, and only a limited part of that because I'm subject to the infinite number of variables in the world, barometric pressure and sunspots and relative humidity. We talk about being powerless, and I always explain that really the only thing I have power over is I get to dress myself in the morning, unless, of course, I'm going somewhere with my wife, and then I don't have that option. Uh, but part of it is routine. We train ourselves to be sober. We institute attitudes, outlooks. Again, the gratitude is huge. Um, Also, acceptance. There's not, we use the serenity prayer pretty much incessantly. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And actually, we use the we version too. Uh, Courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. It's also a little more prosaic way of saying pick your battles. I'm not going to change people's minds. I don't get into shouting matches with conservative people because it's a waste of my time. Um, I got my greatest compliment ever in my life from one of my conservative friends who looked at me one day and just sneered, God, Phil, you're left of the Buddha. And, you know, you can't get that just anywhere. But community is huge. And there have been how many articles in how many publications in the last 10 years at least about the epidemic of loneliness in the United States, particularly among men, particularly among men between 25 and 45, the whole rise of the incels. Um, and I will say, in all sincerity, I again was blessed with all of the things that allow you to um, have an active social life. I'll leave it at that. Um, but I was probably sober 2 or 3 years before I realized that women were people. They were not people to be preyed upon or people to get in the way of my preying upon their friends. So it opened up my world. It enlarged me as a human being. It made me a more complete person. Um, these gifts are profound. And I typically share with folks that I came into recovery living in a rented room with a bathroom down the hall. No, nothing, literally. And I would go to meetings and I would covet the possessions of my fellow sufferers. And if I had been given everything that I thought I wanted when I came into recovery, I would have shortchanged myself so incredibly because I have gifts that I did not know existed when I came in. And we'll talk about those a little more a little later.
I was wondering if you would be able to go through what a typical AA meeting looks like for someone who maybe has never been or is thinking about going for the first time.
Well, who is a typical person in a bar?
It really could be anybody.
Uh, there you have it. Um, we have topic meetings, we have step meetings, we have men's meetings, we have women's meetings, we have gay meetings. Way back when, we had non-smoking meetings. And that, oh my goodness, was the hue and cry. Shut in a bar full of smoke long enough, God damn it, you sit in a goddamn meeting full of smoke. All right. That's my impression of the World War II veteran. Uh, but they are exactly like any encounter you would have at a party, accepting the fact that we're all there for a specific reason. Although, now that I mention the party analogy, there are a lot of people there, maybe because they got nowhere else to go. There are people there, maybe because they think someone else is going to be there and they are interested in someone else and are hoping to be noticed by someone else. There are people there who are fulfilling a court-ordered mandate, and they have a little piece of paper for us to sign and say, yes, they were at the meeting. Um, there are people there with an axe to grind who don't believe this meeting is run the way that it should be, and by God, I'm going to keep coming to this meeting and whip these people into shape. There are people there because it's their home away from home. There are people there because that is their family. We talk about home group. Home group means nothing more than that group that you go to the most often, um, or whatever reason you might choose it to be your home group. There are meetings in which the raw pain is so profound that after you've been around for a while and know how to process that, you are incredibly grateful that you are able to bear witness to this degree of intimacy and share in this absolutely life-changing pain with another human being. Um, there are meetings at which you just laugh your ass off because people tell stupid stories about stupid shit. And you just think, uh, yes, I can relate. Uh, there are movies that wax intellectual to the point of, well, let's refer to a former president in the 90s who said, well, that depends on what you mean by the word the. Uh, there are meetings which are pretty straightforward, and people share what they have to share on the nature of um, what the topic or step might be. Um, so let me try and answer your question as non-obliquely as possible. Typically, it starts out with someone. Some meetings have pre-established chairs. Some meetings, it's whoever is least able to get out of being the chair. There's some sort of an intro. Some groups, it's informal to the point of not existing. Other groups, it is so structured that it takes you the first 15 minutes of the meeting to get through the introduction to the meeting. Typically, the fifth chapter is read, the fifth chapter of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's a genuine 1976 edition. um, Again, I came in 76, but it wasn't until 78 that I actually got sober. Um, Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And then it goes on, it enumerates the 12 steps. And just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? And then again, it might be a topic or it might be a step. Um, Sometimes people have readings. There are big book study meetings. I did not mention those earlier, where we agree to um, read in the big book for a period of time until somebody decides that's a good stopping point. Sometimes it's all read by the chair. Sometimes they pass around paragraph by paragraph or section by section. Um, I don't think I could tell you the variety of AA meetings there are. because I haven't been to them all.
I'm
Uh,
realizing it's not a very fair question. It sounds like the people you meet and the way it's run and the topics that are covered are all widely or extremely variable depending on where you go and the specific session that you're in. So really, it wasn't a very fair question to characterize it as one thing when it's very much not.
I would not call it unfair as much as unrealistic. Um, we are remarkable anarchists and have been since our inception. It's one of the reasons we've survived. Um, we were reading the third tradition a couple of weeks ago because it was March, so it was the third month, third tradition. Okay. And the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And it goes on and on. But the short version is if you're willing to say, I want to stop drinking, you're a member of AA, and nobody, nowhere can kick your ass out. They can say, you're not welcome at this meeting because each meeting is autonomous, but you're a member of AA if you say you are. And I always identify as a drug addict again because it's political. When I came in, I could not have said that and stayed in many of the meetings that I went to. Um, we also went through dually addicted, um, chemically dependent, and now they have some touchy-feely snowflake BS, substance abuse disorder, which to me goes back to an old George Carlin routine where he talks about shell shock going through all of its manifestations until it's finally got to PTSD. And he said if we could have stayed with shell shock and not tried to pretty it up, we could have maybe gotten a lot of people a lot more help.
Mm.
So I'm very comfortable with being a drug addict. I am a drug addict. I haven't gotten high since 1978, but it's ism, not wasm. So technically, I've been sober since about 7:30 this morning because we do this a day at a time.
I very much appreciate your take on looking at these conditions and saying it is what it is. And it sort of goes back to what you were saying before is you control what you can, you accept what you can't, and you pick your battles. And I've just come to appreciate that you're a straight shooter, as they say. You call it how it is. And it sounds like that's a very big part of the philosophy of AA and your own personal philosophy as well.
That's exactly what it's all about. We talk about rigorous honesty. And again, the place you have to start is with yourself. Now, as far as the serenity prayer and picking your battles, I think one of the other crucial things in my world, and hopefully most folks' world, is halt. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired? These things may be accepting your decision. So shut your mouth and figure out whether you need to have a Snickers or chill or get on the phone, call somebody or take a nap. But a lot of times, the reason we're difficult is because of halt. And as an adjunct to that, after having been around for a very long time, I sincerely believe that all of our issues are not our issues. They are human issues. And it's just that addicts are the biggest drama queens on the planet. There's an old joke. Uh, Normal person and drug addict get flat tires. The normal person calls AAA. The addict calls suicide prevention.
Sort of like the struggle with coping skills or the
Oh, we had
dramatization.
none. And I think the one thing that is impossible to get rid of, speaking from my own experience, I cannot tell you any truth with a T from the mountain. I can tell you what is true for me today. But that truth is, well, I've completely lost my train of thought. Sorry.
You were saying that your truth is what's true for you today, and there is no truth with a capital T.
And what predated that?
I'm
You
not sure.
see,
I've lost it as well. Well, maybe it's a good opportunity to kind of move on to some of the next questions I wanted to ask, which were in the years following the start of your sobriety, when you were in early recovery, how did you interact with others in recovery, and how have you remained active in the community through the years?
interacting with others in recovery has been a huge part of the journey because I think you go through a period which most of us refer to as the little pink cloud. Oh, I'm sober. Life is wonderful. Blah, blah, blah. And another period in which you expect that everybody that you see at meetings will be legitimately interested in getting sober, staying sober, being rigorously honest, being a good person. And you can find people with all levels of commitment in a meeting. So there's someone who is about as devout as the day is long, and there's someone there who's hoping to get over on someone else who is there. Um, we have there are the 12 steps, and the 13th step is going to meetings to get laid. That's not why we're there, but it's been going on since the dawn of time. Um, there's the interpretations that everybody adopts for themselves and take very personally. We get, I'd say, a fair number of what I call black letter recovering people. And this refers to a horrible incident in a meeting, probably early 80s, when a young woman was reading the fifth chapter. And she came to the part, God as we understood him, and she read God as we understood God, because she did not want to use the masculine pronoun. And some old fart, about like me, about like now, stepped on her reading in the midst of her reading and said, Hey, read the black parts, Missy. And, I didn't think that that was very accepting or loving or giving or kind or generous or any of that. But there are those, just like with any religion, who believe the word is written. Uh, so let it be written, so let it be done. Yeah.
So not open to interpretation to some people.
My great belief, again, my belief, true for me today, is that the big book is sheet music and that we all sing it in our own way. So if you think of Over the Rainbow with Judy Garland, absolutely beautiful, absolutely unforgettable. You think of Over the Rainbow with that enormous Hawaiian man, absolutely beautiful, absolutely unforgettable. The two do not sound anything alike, but the two are very clearly Over the Rainbow. So that's where I am, which is going to put me uh, in the ill graces of many, and that's fine.
Others that might be more strict about interpreting exactly as it's written.
Everybody's more strict than me.
Okay, okay.
Remember, I'm left of the Buddha.
Right. Um, I did want to ask if you can kind of talk a little bit more about how long-term sobriety is different than the early years.
I believe, like I believe that you and I are talking at this moment, that sobriety, like life itself, is a sine wave, and that sometimes you're above the median and sometimes you're below it. We often talk about how it levels out the peaks and valleys And I don't know that that's true anymore. I think it makes the peaks and valleys, if anything, better defined and more appreciated for what they are. So I might be absolutely distraught because of something. Um, and to be perfectly honest, I can't remember having been absolutely distraught in some considerable period of time. But it's all nuance. And it's within recent memory, certainly 5 years, that musicians talked about you have to do your 10,000 hours. So before you can be adept at your instrument, whatever it might be, you have to put in 10,000 hours practicing or playing or performing or all of the above. I think it's that way with recovery. And at some point in time, you know you can play Flight of the Bumblebee, for God's sake, without making mistakes, but you don't get the feeling that you want to get from it. There are a lot of very young people who are very technically adept at an instrument, but they don't play with any feeling. They're mechanically perfect, emotionally not even there.
Sure.
So there is a nuance and I'm going to say willingness for me after all this time, because I know that if I think someone's behaving about as badly as it's possible for them to behave, if I don't have to get into it one-on-one immediately, I'm able to sit there and process and think, oh my God, what's going on with this person? Do they need a hug?
Mm.
Um, I'm even at the point in my life where I think, what happened to Putin as a kid that he is this way?
When you're talking about this, is it through the frame of um, when helping other people get through the challenges that they're going through? You're referring to it as sort of like a sponsor sponsee sort of situation, or just people that you
Absolutely,
know closely?
absolutely. But sponsee is very official, very formal, if you will. Although with someone like me, it's not very formal. With others, it will be um, like the most regimented, um, no margin for error drill you've ever been through, whether it be with filling out a form to get into medical school or something that egregious.
Sure, sure.
Uh, but I think, we're all sponsoring each other in that way, that we have showed up at the meeting. And with some exceptions, everybody wants to be there. They're there for the purposes that we espouse. We're there to share our experience, strength, and hope. And sometimes our experiences are very predictable. Sometimes they're very shocking or frightening or terrifying. Sometimes they're just stupid. And, sometimes they're hysterical. I have never cried as genuinely and as completely as I have in meetings. And I have never laughed as hard or as uninhibited as I have at meetings. And
It really
again,
speaks
it's
to the community you mentioned.
the community and the humanity of the soul.
Absolutely. Um, if you were to say that there was a theme, an overarching theme of your life experiences with drinking and then being in recovery and then being in long recovery, what would you say that that theme would be?
Funny you ask. Um, this is April, the fourth month, and I will be leading the meeting on Saturday on the fourth tradition. in which we find the true story of a group. We'll call them the Middleton group. And they were so enchanted with the magic that was recovery, they were going to heal the world. They're going to build a facility and sober people up on one floor, give them job skills on another floor, give them social skills on yet another floor, and run the riffraff of the world through this facility and create nirvana. And because they were so enchanted with this wonder they were going to create, they had 61 rules, so everything would be perfect. And they opened up, and it was a debacle on every level they could imagine, and many they had never even considered. And here they wrote, and I now quote directly from the 12 and 12, on a small piece of paper about the size of a golf scorecard, rule number 62. Don't take yourself too damn seriously.
I have a feeling you might have said that before.
Uh, it's my vanity plate on my car, and people praise me now and again and say, "What's that all about?"
Okay. And you tell them the story. I just had one last question for you, just sort of to wrap up our conversation here. If you had one piece of advice to someone who is currently struggling with addiction, what would that be?
Can't do it. Have to. Be gentle with yourself. Be patient with yourself.
I like
And
it.
we cannot have this interview without my having read the promises, because I'm a promises junkie and that's what I'm known for. And I mentioned earlier that I coveted the possessions of my fellow sufferers when I came in. These are also called the ninth step promises, which come after the ninth step, which is where we made amends to such people wherever possible, excepting when to do so would injure them or others. So obviously, it's not a good amend for me to tell you that I slept with your wife. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. And I wanted to point out that in the tradition of Southern Baptist call and response, which I picked up going to a meeting in the South, um, typically when that is read, we look up at the group and say, "Are these extravagant promises?" And the group thunders back, "We think not."
Mhm.
So it's a wonderful thing, and as I said, I've not amounted to anything, but I intuitively know the answers to situations which used to baffle me, and I am absolutely comfortable being myself. I don't need to be Bruce Springsteen or Evel Knievel.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you ending on that note. Not only is it something to consider moving forward, but also a good taste of sort of the philosophy and what might be read or talked about in a meeting. So I appreciate you taking time to read that passage. And thank you for meeting with me today. I appreciate it. Very valuable to be able to hear your thoughts and about your life experiences.
Thank you. And one more note, I will mention that you did say philosophy.
Would you believe me if I said that was intentional? It was not. Well, thank you, Phil. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, sir.